How's it going, everyone? Alrighty. Boy, is it a beautiful day. But it's also freezing. Alright. Today, we are going to continue a reading of a book that I was lent by a special friend called Ecstasy by Robert A. Johnson. The book is about understanding the psychology of joy, and I'm about a third of the way through it so far. And one of the major themes is the difference between the concept of joy and happiness. And I'll get into that a bit. Now. I'll start off with a reading of a recent poem that I wrote. I have not titled it, once again. I seem to recently be titling poems after I write them instead of before, which is the opposite of how I used to. I don't know, it's kind of evolving. And I find it. It's a little bit of a challenge with the wind. Alrighty. I mean, the most simple title would be something along the lines of Silly Goose. A predominant theme. Here it goes. A silly goose on the loose is indeed what I am. So please do not request of me the answers. Do not call... Okay. I don't know what I did here. I made a change and it doesn't seem to make any sense, so I'll have to figure out why I did that. Okay, I'll read it unedited. A silly goose on the loose is indeed what I am, so please do not request of me the answers. Do not call me smart, intellectual, or wise, for I struggle to take these dangerous compliments while I seek them. Few know my name, and I am still pompous, sometimes quite confident I have already been damned. It must be so. I, a waddling contradiction, 'tis Jekyll and Hyde waltzing within me, so naturally, often forgetting that this is function of choice, product of heeding guidance from God, the type which excites and causes quiver perhaps more than experience of any other characteristic. Anything goes is where the fear originates from. Always choosing love, a fanciful thought, but to play it out, a prolonged stroll through the corridors of fears, always adapting and changing face. As the goose, I quack my apologies and bow the crane of my neck in humble prayer so I may embrace the raw, human cowardice, fraudulence, ignorance, arrogance, which I nauseate myself with, a crystal pond reflection of, in moment of potentially dangerous levels of rigorous honesty. I do not escape returning to dust, a cooked, silly goose. Alright, so, I'll leave you to interpret that one how you may. And I need to figure out something to do with my hair. Well, it's all windy. Someone told me recently that I remind them of the character named Wesley from the movie Princess Bride, which I've never seen yet, surprisingly. One would think by now that I would have seen it, but nope. I think, fittingly so to what I'm reading, joy, the concept of joy, the experience of joy is a good theme for today's monologue, perhaps dialogue with you all, however you come to interpret it. But basically, I would like to find in the book where joy was defined, because I think that was okay. Yeah, this seems to make the distinguishing between joy and happiness pretty clear. Happiness was defined as a happening of chance, luck, or fortune, which I don't know if, I mean, I guess I kind of would agree with that. I guess if it's the dictionary definition, so be it, but happiness to me is more a fleeting, it's a short-lived sub-emotion of joy, almost. I guess happiness ties more to, in my opinion, happiness ties more to appeasement of the physical body. It ties more to enjoyment of the body within the physical plane of existence. Whereas joy, by definition, was defined as an exaltation of the spirit, gladness, delight, the beatitude of heaven or paradise. So to me, joy is, I mean, I'll use like the most kind of extreme example of how I define joy. And joy would be being able to acknowledge luck, acknowledge chance, and also acknowledge misfortune, while at the same time being grateful for the ability to experience the moment. And part of the ability to experience joy is acknowledgement that nothing lasts forever, which, tying back to happiness, you know, it's funny, I think one of the quotes was, in this book is, "We are constantly chasing after this experience. We think that we should be happy. After all, isn't the pursuit of happiness guaranteed to us in the Bill of Rights?" Which to me is hilarious, because it's not that the guarantee of happiness is concealed within the Bill of Rights. It's the guarantee of the pursuit of happiness, which I added an annotation in the book saying that the pursuit of happiness is equivalent to unhappiness for me. As in, it's the chase. It's the never being satisfied. And I guess perhaps the nature of time, where time doesn't ever stand still, necessitates that we must, to some extent, be seeking something in the future or reflecting upon something in the past. It may be true, but when I tie back to joy, I think to myself that it is me being able to go through an experience which may not fill me with utmost happiness. It may fill me with boredom, or boredom would not be a good word. I don't know, feelings of discomfort, feelings of longing, feelings of lust. And I think all of these things are present when boredom is present. But I think that boredom, as one of my previous school administrators said, boredom is the result of being boring. And I guess I would go off of that and say that joy is the result of being joyous. And being joyous is making the best of any situation. And I would be lying to myself if I were not to acknowledge that I feel like there have been many, many, many situations in my life which have been wonderful, which have been simple to find joy in. But on the flip side, I do not feel that I've had, especially early on, experiences where joy was pretty much impossible to recognize. Joy, to me, is understanding that pain exists for the purpose of overcoming, for the purpose of transmuting. Pain can be, it's like it's alchemy within life, is to, magically transmute pain into satisfaction of overcoming. So, I guess in the sense of joy, tying back to joy, joy could also be something that comes as the result of sticking it through to the end. So in a situation where you find it easy to be boring, one finds it easy to be distressed, easy to be annoyed. For example, having to spend time with frustrating coworkers or people who very seldom take accountability for their own actions. As far as I can tell, I'm always going to have to deal with people of that nature in some way or another. So joy is, to me, being able to kind of observe the magic that's happening in that moment. Observe that, it's so easy to get bothered right now. What can I learn from this? What positive benefit can I get from setting aside my negative emotions and embracing something as an opportunity? I guess joy is being able to find the beauty in a world where there is a lot of visible suffering everywhere, where there's visible decay. Like, I sit here in this little kind of vacant parking lot off of a main road on the beach. It's a beach which does not seem to be cheap real estate wise. So I recognize that I've driven past this lot countless times, and I've always noticed it to be empty. Police officers park on the side to radar gun people and pull them over. And there's a little shack which looks like a convenience store, just chilling here. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on with this place? I guess maybe it was wrecked in a hurricane. I just wonder how I could live and pass by here for over the span of 2 years and haven't seen anything go on with it. I don't know. Some things seem to last so long, and other things seem to just fall away instantly. I think that's one feature of humanity. It seems to be that we can construct things and build things that last for a long time, but we don't last for a very long time. It's as if we create things in the moment, and when we do a good job of that, we end up leaving it behind for future generations. But I guess the flip side of this is that we leave behind the repercussions of kind of disconnecting ourselves with experiencing joy. At least in the culture that I live in, productivity is kind of, as has become apparent, productivity is pretty much all that's valued by the man, by them. That's one thing I loved about Gravity's Rainbow was the consistent regard of them, because it's so vague and there's always them. Terence McKenna, one of my favorite dudes to listen to old lectures from, he would always say that it seems so obvious that people up there are in control because of the power that they hold. But he always said that no matter how much it seems like they're in control, he believed that the reality is that no one is really in control. So I think, going back to Gravity's Rainbow, how Pynchon used the term them and they kind of as the oppressors, the ones driving the lack of experiences of joy, the ones encouraging it, are pretty much impossible to define. And I think that from my own understanding of things, my own experience, and kind of like the last line of the poem, if I am brutally, rigorously honest with myself, I cannot deny that I participate in all of the self-oppression in that sense. Like, as long as I am willing to participate in the system, which dictates that it's not very common to live an experience of joy on a regular basis, I have to accept the part that I'm playing in that. But I guess the cool part about life is that I can do what I will to change that in my own life. And I think something that's important that I acknowledge now is that if I want something, I have to be willing to ask for it. I don't expect things to just be bestowed upon me anymore. In the sense where if I plant a seed in life, I'm essentially asking for, whatever harvest that planting will bring. But when it comes to relating to other people, I have to ask for what I want. And in order for it to resonate with another person, especially someone that I'm connected to within a system, for example, work, internship, I can't just leave halfway through the day because I want to. I can ask to, and I can tell the person why. I can tell the person why I think I should be able to, or I think it would be okay to, whatever it may be. And 9 times out of 10, in cases like that, because the system we live in is self-policing, the answer will be no, because our behavior is enabling of one another. This ties well back to the previous video I did to kind of discuss the concept of enablement. If I leave early from a day of internship, all of the other interns are going to want to. And this phenomenon is what makes it clear that, we don't have the ability to exist in a vacuum outside of every other person. And I think that if I'm interpreting my own observations, it seems to me that the internet, cell phones, have kind of given us this paradoxical, ironic feeling that we can exist within a vacuum. We can isolate ourselves. We can hide behind the screen. But back to the paradox part, the irony is that it actually is showing us the opposite. It's like the more we try to convince ourselves that this is possible, the more it becomes apparent that it's not. So I guess if I had to relate this sort of idea to the concept of being either asleep or awake, like if you've ever heard of, the term of someone being awakened, or like that the majority of the population is asleep and like they don't notice what's going on right in front of their faces. This is what I would tie to that most closely. It would be kind of the idea that it seems that we're being hoodwinked by them. So I don't know, it's fun. But let me thumb through the first third of this and see if there's anything that stands out. And one thing that I noticed is that I guess ecstasy is tied to joy, of course. Ecstasy is like the otherworldly, it's being teleported to another dimension of experience. Like, happiness is this quick, it's not so alien as joy is. And I've spoken of the word alien before, especially in my poetry, but alien, I guess foreign, like not something that we are not well acquainted with, something that I am not well acquainted with. Because when I experience joy or ecstasy, I think to myself, I didn't realize that this was possible. It's the best example that can be used to describe the mysterious nature of joy is crying tears of joy. There's the song "Do You Realize" by the Flaming Lips, and one of the first lines is, "Do you realize that happiness makes you cry?" And what a question that is. Like, think about how funny that is, because it's true. And as I said, I'm not well acquainted with it because the number of times that I've cried tears of joy in my life have been very few. I mean, as I grow older, it seems that crying becomes an experience that I experience less as time goes on. It doesn't mean that I don't want to. In fact, recently I've wanted to cry, and just it's not ready to come out. I have this emotion pent up inside of me that I can feel, and I want to let it out, but I guess I'm trying to learn how to do that. And I think meditation will play a big part in that. But back to the topic at hand. Joy is something that is so foreign to the society and culture that we live in. Happiness is not, I would say that happiness is not uncommon, at least in the circle that I know. Happiness is addicting. Happiness is something that is short-lived. It's something that this idea has been sold to us that we need to be happy all the time, or that we should be happy all the time. When realistically, I think that we should understand that we should be seeking to experience joy when possible, which, going back to a point I made earlier, maybe it's not possible in the exact moment, but in that moment when it's not being experienced, you're aware that it's coming down the road. But happiness is, I think, what drives addiction. Happiness is that quick, relieving feeling of like relaxation. I think it's why humor seems to be a very sharp, double-edged sword. Some days, I hear something that would make me laugh and make my heart sing with a feeling of freedom, and then other days, certain things that at face value are very funny make me nauseous. So I guess it comes down to balance. But Robert A. Johnson was a Jungian psychologist. I think one of his first books was Transformation, and then also Owning Your Own Shadow. He's written, this book is about ecstasy, the psychology of joy. It is largely, he uses the myth of Dionysus, the god Dionysus, the son of Zeus, in Greek mythology, kind of as the descriptor for how he fleshes out the concept of joy. He wrote a book called He and She and We. He basically was a book, I've not read any of those yet. I probably will at some point because I like the way he writes, and I'm into Jungian psychology, so I kind of study the psychologists who followed up his work, like this guy, James Hillman, Robert Moore. But he is about masculine psychology, so integration of the anima, the feminine side of man, and then she, the opposite of that, the animus, the masculine side of a woman, and then we is the psychology of romantic love, which, I don't know, that could be a little sticky. I'm interested to see what that one brings out. And then one called Femininity Lost and Regained, which I'm sure is very interesting because the society we live in through history is patriarchal in nature. The religions that we practice in society largely are patriarchal. Christianity is patriarchal. Judaism is patriarchal. Greek mythology, patriarchal. And one thing before I go through these pages that came to mind was a discussion I was having in class with peers, and it was about the whole concept of a woman giving up her last name when marrying. And it's an interesting topic because I thought to myself, we're seeking equality here, at least so they say. I don't think that equality is a feature of nature. If it were, I think it would show itself more often. I think equality is something that we are to strive for. If equality and balance kind of go hand in hand as far as human rights go, etc. But basically, I thought to myself, why couldn't men and women just keep their last names, and tack them on to each other? Like, basically create a hyphenated last name with both of them. And then I thought to myself, okay, that's all great for one generation, but then what happens when they have kids and the kids have the hyphenated combined last names, and then those kids get married? Do they end up with 4 last names? Like, I mean, I'm speaking from a place where if I were to get married and my wife were to agree to taking my last name, I would be the one who continues on name-wise. And, really, I don't feel like I care. I don't think that it really matters. Like, if it so happened that I had to give up my last name and take my wife's last name, and this came as a result of the way it's always been, it wouldn't really matter because my wife's last name would be her father's last name when her father married her mother, and her mother's last name was given away. So it's not that, I don't know, I guess in a sense it seems like part of the woman's identity in this name dropping is erased, but that the framework dictates it so that the male's last name is also the female's last name. So even the name that the female is giving up is the male's last name from her parents. So it's just tricky because would it matter if it were the opposite way? And one of the reasons, which was an entirely valid and interesting reason for bringing this conversation up, was the discussion had to do with changes in voting requirements. And I believe one of the issues was that if they require an ID to match your birth certificate to vote, and you get married and your last name changes, you have that last name on your ID and it doesn't match, what do you do? Or if you don't have an updated ID, I think the idea was if you don't have an updated ID yet after you get married, and then you go to vote, and they're like, oh, your name doesn't match. So the main point is that, that's a valid way in which women in general have been given a leg down on voting power. So as much as I have a stance on how seemingly useless it is to vote at this point, I will still acknowledge that like it's something that's really happening, which if I were a woman, I would be concerned about, most likely. So part one is basically digging into the myth of Dionysus. Definition of ecstasy, rise and fall of Dionysus, celebration, union of man and woman, and basically how we are a culture and society devoid of experiencing joy due to a lack of embracing of Dionysian energy. And one thing that I find very interesting is that so far in the part that I have read, there is a comparison between Dionysus as a god and Jesus. And the comparisons were actually very, very close. It's something I never would have considered. Trying to find it. So Dionysus in lore was born 3 times, and Christ was born twice. Born, died, and was resurrected. Both of them were ritualistically eaten, their flesh and blood. The followers of Dionysus also consumed their god symbolically as goat flesh, and drank him in the same way as wine. And what's interesting is that in Christianity, the goat is the face of the devil. So it's interesting because where we lie today, we are a nation of God and country. I can't find where the exact comparisons were made, but they were very close. Aha. Jesus and Dionysus are both sons of divine fathers and mortal virgin mothers. Christ harrowed hell, Dionysus emerged from the underworld. Semele ascended to Olympus as Thyone. The Virgin Mary ascended to heaven. Dionysus and Jesus were both hailed as King of Kings. Dionysus celebrated his advent with a newborn baby placed in a winnowing basket, the forerunner of baby Jesus in the manger. Both Jesus and Dionysus die, Jesus on the cross and Dionysus at the hands of the Titans, and both are reborn, symbolizing the life that does not end. Dionysus ascends to Olympus, Jesus to heaven, and both sit at the right hand of their Father. Like Jesus, Dionysus was usually not believed when he claimed to be the Son of God. Both suffered at the hands of local political authorities. Both had retinues comprising outcasts and women of questionable repute, and both showed a disregard for the established modes of worship. And of course, the wine. One of Jesus' miracles was turning water into wine, something Dionysus can be said to do on a regular basis. One waters the vine, grows the grape, and turns it into wine. Eucharist is a ceremony of ecstasis, drinking the wine, the blood of God, and transcending time and space to become for a moment divine. So we have tried to kill the God to extinguish the ecstatic experience, but he always returns, and with each return he seems to gain strength and power. We dethrone Dionysus, tear him to bloody bits, boil him in a pot, and he returns as Jesus. We crucify Jesus, and he is reborn. So, in a sense, it's kind of like they're saying that, I guess Robert Johnson is seeing Jesus Christ as a human understood evolution of the God of ecstasy, the God of joy. And I mean, I think of songs sung at Christmas time, Joy to the World. I think of how Judaism and Christianity were, evolving at similar times. How it doesn't seem appropriate to pretend as if one's method of worshiping God, whatever God is to that person, is right or wrong, because I think the whole concept of the idea of God is that we are not able to grasp the concept of God. It's out of reach. God is what we experience in everything, to me, but I'm not able to understand it. It goes back to the whole knowing nothing idea. If I know nothing, I can't pretend like I understand anything. Science can pretend, but science contradicts itself all the time. Science states that all matter, creation, is the result of the Big Bang Theory, which is basically an explosion where all matter appeared out of nowhere. But then science also says that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. So did that law come into effect only after matter was created? Because it doesn't make sense, if so. Because then the law could not be that matter cannot be created. Perhaps it cannot be destroyed. But as far as we know, it can't be created or destroyed. At least in this physical plane of existence. Science tells me that a desk that I put my hand on, which is solid, is not actually solid. That there's gaps in between all of it. It's interesting stuff. I think that one of the parts that I've liked the most so far is the idea of balance. This book is not an argument for only embracing of and accepting of Dionysian energy. The idea is not either or, but either and or. This quote here. It is not enough to throw the whole society over and go dance naked on the beach. Such experiments, however well-intentioned, are doomed to failure. We cannot simply move from the realm of rationality to the irrational realm of Dionysus and think that everything will be solved. This is either-or thinking. Jung has said that for us, the choice is no longer either-or, but either and or. We must touch Dionysus. We must bring him back into our lives in a humanized form. Or in denying him, we will destroy ourselves. And I think that's what, if the idea of societal collapse or societal downfall is in mind, I think that's the result of what was just described in that passage. We will destroy ourselves. And I guess societal downfall or collapse, the fall of empires, could be considered destruction of self. And I think that addiction, seeking happiness, seeking pleasure, is not the same as joy. It's not the same as ecstasy. These things are the side effect of repressed Dionysian energy. Because Dionysian energy is, it's spiritual. It is acknowledgement of the intangible aspects of being alive. Same as practice of Christianity. Same as practice of Judaism. Practice of Buddhism. It's all acknowledgement of the spirit, which our society does not partake in, at least largely. It's an option. And I think that's one thing that's pretty cool, is that it's up to the individual to decide what it is about life that they want and what it is about life that they don't want so much of. And I think something that's interesting is, at least in my life, I see elements of, you could call it Stockholm Syndrome, where if materialism and pleasure through the physical plane of existence is more or less the equivalent of my oppressor, part of me loves that. Part of me loves being oppressed in that way, and I can't deny that. It's a subconscious part of me. I would say the conscious part of me is tired of it. The conscious part of me is exhausted. There's another poem that I wrote. I'll publish it to Substack this upcoming week. And the theme of tiredness is one of the bigger themes of that poem. But yeah, I don't know. Everything around me is something which I can't very much so explain. And something that followed up that passage is, this is the burden that is on us now, to keep the fine points of our patriarchal world, its order, form, care, and structure, and bring the Dionysian back in to enliven it without doing a flip-flop and going to pieces. Only in this way can we begin to move toward wholeness and joy. So I would describe the goal here outlined in that passage as the goal being balance, which maybe human beings are just not very good at. I'm not very good at it. I'm getting better at it. I'm putting a lot of time and effort towards it, in regard to how I relate to other people, how I relate to myself, how I relate to my environment. Balance is something that I'm very much focusing on. And I think one of the reasons for me that balance is hard is because I have spent a large majority of my life so far out of balance. I have spent a large majority of my life so far in excess. Whether it be excess intellectualism, excess pleasure, via drug use, sexuality, infinitely available, free to access pornography, anything, junk food, walking through a a gas station on a road trip to see the aisles full of Celsius energy drinks. My good friend came back from his first day on the job yesterday, and he described the person who's training him as someone who had 6 milligram Zyn pouches, a nicotine vape, a dab pen, and a Monster energy drink all at the same time. And he was just ripping the 2 vapes, drinking his Monster, and popping the Zyn pouches. And this guy is one of the top producers in the company. Like, this is the excess of which I talk. And this is the excess of which I have participated in, largely. For a lot of my life. It's something that only became more and more prominent as I grew older. And that is why I can sit here today and say that I am so grateful to acknowledge myself as an addict. I am grateful and excited to be able to say that. Someone waved to me. But yeah, I'm grateful to be able to acknowledge that, because the flip side of it is where I do the opposite. I participate in the opposite. And a good example of that is silent meditation. A good example of it is reading. I know someone who watches TV shows at increased speed. You can change the speed on YouTube. You could do this with my videos if you so desired. You can change the speed on Netflix to 1.5 times or 2 times speed, so that you can watch. You can shove the content that you're consuming into your experience in a shorter amount of time. Would it be considered living life abundantly? I don't know. Could an addictive lifestyle be considered an abundant lifestyle? I think perhaps it could. But silent meditation, for example, you sit and you spend, I do a silent meditation meeting every Saturday morning, and we spend half of the meeting, which is an hour long, spend half of the meeting in silence, sitting there and listening to the sounds in the room, experiencing the thoughts that come up in our minds. But in reality, it's mental discipline. To me, it's a practice of mental discipline. It's a practice of being able to acknowledge the unknown, to acknowledge, I guess, the wisdom of the unknown, wisdom of uncertainty. My friend, in that meeting, after I read one of my poems, he thought and shared with me that it would be cool to write one about the wisdom of uncertainty. And the next week, he brought it and read it, and it was wonderful. He described, I believe, himself as a vessel on an ocean, on a turbulent ocean, and how the wisdom of uncertainty allows one to be washed completely by the ocean, enveloped by it. I think Alan Watts once said something about the insanity of the idea of a wave trying to identify itself within a whole ocean as a singular thing, which is what the experience of being a human being is to me. I have not read much of this. I guess I'll just find some other passages that I've liked instead of, maybe I'll read 10 pages after to round the video out. Anyways, this week has been great, in a way where I was being boring, because in a corporate setting it's easy to be boring. it's a good opportunity to choose that. In an institutional setting, it's generally easy to be boring. But I think that's a trap that I'm not going to fall for anymore. I mean, I'll inevitably fall for it here and there, but I'm aware of it, so it's on me to not be boring, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about how I can see attendance in recovery meetings, silent meditation, a lot of time reading as quite the opposite of being boring. And one of my best friends actually, when my lifestyle changed, he said that I have become boring, or I've lost my fun nature, which I completely understand, because I used to be a wild, free-spirited party boy. Not to any crazy extremes, but I was very, very, very careless. And at the same time, paradoxically, somehow cared too much. I think the things that I have begun to care about versus the things that I don't care about now so much are opposites, if that makes sense. So, in reflection, I feel like I've almost completely swapped elements of my personality, which I will say bluntly has not been easy in the slightest. And it presents itself as somewhat of an identity crisis every once in a while. It definitely did in the beginning. Anyways, let's see if I can find some cool little passages. Alright, this one's cool. Intoxication. Dionysus is the god of wine and ecstasy, liberation and abandon. He is the perennial profusion of color and life and energy. When we touch Dionysus, we touch the irrational wisdom of the senses and experience joy. Because we have disallowed ourselves this experience, however, we get the darker side of intoxication, a confusion of the senses, addiction, that is far from spiritual. Addiction to me is spiritual deprivation and bankruptcy. With the first sip of wine, we leave the everyday world and enter a new world. We are flushed with warmth and happiness, free to enjoy ourselves. We are still in control, but feel able to let go of our burdens. This is the point at which the followers of Dionysus stopped. In fact, some of them never drank wine at all. They needed to be conscious to experience divine ecstasy. You can't be joyous and dead drunk at the same time. Unfortunately, when we replaced Dionysus with the drunkard Bacchus, we forgot when to stop. Dionysus himself got drunk only once, and he didn't like it. To cure his wine-induced madness, he went for a visit to Zeus's shrine. One story has it that he bogged down in quicksand and was saved by a donkey, who took him raving and drunk, but safe nonetheless, to Zeus. As recompense, Zeus gave the donkey human speech. The other story, which I like much better, is that Dionysus turned into a donkey and arrived at Zeus's shrine braying, which became human speech. So when we get drunk enough to get this jackass aspect going, we are no longer candidates for ecstasy. Our humanness is lost. I wonder if that rings true to anyone. Our humanness is lost. In this society, I can talk to someone of any age, someone in their early teens, someone in their mid-30s, someone in their late 80s, and many, many, many of them will consistently tell me that they are confused beyond belief. Instead of taking the opportunity to transcend the material world, we keep drinking, or taking drugs, or trying to make money, or falling in love, to regain that first flush of happiness, which we mistook for joy. Chase it as we might, however, happiness is by nature an ephemeral experience. As we drink, we become louder, looser, less in control of what we say and do. In trying to hold on to happiness, we slide headlong into despair. And if we continue to drink until we can drink no more, we are likely to become violent and ultimately unconscious. And this to me it's very easy to look at this in terms of addictiveness to drugs, addictiveness to drinking alcohol, addictiveness to opiates or opioids. Apparently opioid is the more accurate term nowadays than opiates. Don't ask me why. I do not know the scientific reasoning. But I understand that I can be drunk on a hell of a lot more than a chemical drug, because of the way my brain interacts with experience. My brain is, as they say in recovery, it contains an internal drugstore. My brain doles out doses of drugs per its own programming. Dopamine, oxytocin, what have you, serotonin, all of these things. So, as long as I'm acting in ways which will act upon these receptors, I can be drunk on anything. And I think that's why I'll tie into this. I think I want to do a video specifically on lust, because it's so... Lust is one of the things that I'm grappling with a lot nowadays. I think per my chemical sobriety, or drug sobriety, lust, I think, is something which is tempting me to replace what I have given up with it. But the interesting thing to me about lust is that it's built into ourselves. Like, lust for me is contained within the physical being of women. It's contained within the person itself. So in that sense, I know that it does me a disservice when I let it get out of hand, specifically. But I think what's so intriguing about lust is that it's not created. It's not a source outside of us. It's a source contained within humanity. Like, we lust for one another. And I think gluttony is along the same lines, like in the sense that we are what we eat, but also gluttony for wealth, like gluttony for financial power. But I think lust still is closer to our core. Because it's in relation to our physical existence, versus, it doesn't account for, lust does not seem to account for the intangible spiritual aspects of being. So that passage really stood out to me because it's describing drunkenness and chasing happiness, and how as we do this, as we become that jackass, we are no longer candidates for ecstasy. It's out of our capacity to experience it. We become shut off from it. Our humanness is lost. And oh, there goes a heron. I wonder if you can see that. I don't think so. Seems like a stomping ground for herons. Thinking about drugs, and I say heroin instead of heron. This is a passage which I haven't really grasped yet. Not fully. I mean, it's definitely a thought-provoking one. When we deny ourselves contact with the awe-fullness, awfulness, and terror of the soul, we do ourselves great damage. When we conceive of heaven as a clean, well-lighted place with pleasant harp music and bland angels, we eviscerate our religion. When there is no longer any official room in our religious observance for the ecstasy of divinity or the dark night of the soul, we experience that light and darkness in whatever way we can. In other centuries, that way might have been called possession. We have chosen to express it through physical and psychological symptoms. I mean, to me, I read that as, the witches, the Salem witches. I would say the Salem witches, this was a scapegoat. I think society, when we are denying these things, society must find a scapegoat for the understanding. There must be a reason to it. And the reasons of today are mental illness, random acts of violence, school shootings, and all of this is always done. Many of the times these things happen, they're done in the name of religion or righteousness. So it's definitely thought-provoking. It's that as long as it's suppressed within us, it's going to come out in some way or another. And we are going to want to scientifically describe why that is. It's not going to be a spiritual description of why. When a person is diagnosed schizophrenic, it's for a scientific reason, not for a spiritual reason. To us, in this society. To me, I don't think so. I think it's much, much more difficult because of our ineptness with this sort of stuff, how little we focus upon it. I think it's so much more tough to get to the bottom of any of these things. And I think it's why, true crime is a thing. Why is it so that we've made a spectacle out of investigating the reasons behind crimes when the reason never becomes clear? Take the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix series. The whole idea is that the interpretation that the viewer is left with is a question mark. The most common reaction to things such as that are, I don't understand how that person could have ever become that. How could that person have ever done that? How could that school shooter have ever done what he did? How could the middle school girl stand up in her class and say, I am so frustrated that I'm going to shoot you all? How is that possible? And I think if you ask yourself hard questions, I think it's easy to understand. I mean, not easy, but I think that it's possible to understand why these things happen. And I think that it's really simple in the sense that it is a result of all the rest. As I said earlier, nothing exists in a vacuum. Things that happen for a reason. Great dictators become great dictators because all of the rest of the population, in some sense or another, is accepting of it. Maybe because they don't feel they have a choice, or because they do have a choice and they're not choosing, or they're choosing the opposite. Anyways, going on tangents here, but this is what I like. I like the, I like when the connections kind of just make themselves, and just kind of stream of consciousness. Maybe stream of consciousness will get boring at some point, and I'll have to change it up a bit. I think should I end up with more time in the future, I will probably try to structure these videos a little bit more, for the purpose of coherence and cohesiveness. Alright, last passage I'll read. Looking for ecstasy in all the wrong places. Our society esteems thinking and doing, progress and success above all else. Mind you, success is more or less as beauty in the eyes of the beholder. Success is up for interpretation. We go straight ahead, aiming for the top, looking out for number one in all of our endeavors. If a given thing does not have monetary value or show a concrete return, we will probably place it lower on the scale. We tend to like those things we can control and dislike what we can't control or understand. These are the values of our patriarchal society, with its emphasis on power and acquisition, and it has won many fine prizes for us. Without our love for discovery, facts, science, progress, and innovation, we would certainly not have all of the medical advances that save lives, or the machinery that makes our daily routine so much easier. All of this, however, has been won at the expense of less tangible qualities, as in these less tangible qualities go away. Feeling and intuition, caring and nurturing, empathy and receptivity, the Dionysian qualities. We tend to devalue them because they do not show concrete rewards. It's not that they don't show rewards, it's that they don't show visible, tangible, material rewards. Even though realistically in translation they do. Because what I said is the primary reward of these qualities is ability to relate well to ourselves, to others, and to our environment, which of course is material in nature to some extent. Being able to, get along in the same space as someone who you may not share the same beliefs and values of. A fruitful, long-lasting partnership with a lover. I don't know. So it said, without our love for discovery, fact, science, progress, and innovation, we would certainly not have all the medical advances that save lives, machinery that makes our daily routine so much easier. Okay, so all of this stuff makes our daily routine so much easier, but it also makes it such that we are required to be more productive. Like the whole sell of technology was that this will, it was a sell of a false promise of you will not have to work as hard, basically. That's what AI is. AI will do it all for you. You'll be left with so much free time to do whatever you want. Does that seem to be happening around us? Do people seem to have a surplus of free time? It doesn't seem that way to me. And I'm writing a book about why that is. And I might be wrong, might be right, but I don't know, I guess we'll find out. Someone will find out. Craving spiritual ecstasy, we mistakenly seek material fulfillment. We chase after a phantom, and when we catch it, in the form of more money, more food, more sex, more drugs, more drinks, more oblivion, we find that we have been chasing ephemeral happiness when we should have invited lasting joy. What do we do next? We use all the intellectual power at our command to fill this void. We read books and we take classes, looking for the answer, but the answer can only be found in the sensuous world of Dionysus, and we have forgotten where that is. As far as I'm concerned, the answer is found in the myth, in alchemy. It's found in the symbolism. So, as it said, we'll use all of our intellectual prowess to read books and to learn more. But I think I've come to realize that the reason why I appreciate reading is because of the symbolic meaning hidden within it. Because if it were for the purpose of knowledge, I would be reading scientific textbooks. I would be reading literature which directs the purpose of what was written as being the correct answer, when something of this nature is entirely up for interpretation. It's up for symbolic interpretation. So the magic is that I'm reading symbols printed onto paper made out of trees and having inner hallucinations, should you call it. So it gets the imagination going, and I think that it keeps me in touch with the sensuous world, which the culture I live in has so much shut down. But again, I strive for balance. I still love to go to the theater and watch a good movie. But I guess generally I would say that I look for symbolism in most things. I look to read between the lines, because I think that's how meaning is created in life. I know I don't have the answers, and I know nobody else does either. And I think that's when life started to become very exciting to me, which is interesting, because I didn't see that being how it would play out. How much time do we got here? Read the rest of this little section and then call it. This section is called androgyny, the union of male and female. If you want to nurture the heroic side of yourself, you must nurse it with both your masculine and feminine natures. Mac Miller said, "Why is heroism so close to heroin?" Good question. In romanticism, when someone says, you know, the so-and-so is my soulmate, I have found my soulmate. In Jungian terms, androgyny is the integration of masculine and feminine, soul images. Anima, the feminine, means soul. Animus, the masculine, means spirit. A man's anima appears in his dreams as a woman. A woman dreams of her animus as a man. Jungian psychology would say that when we dream of the opposite sex, even if that dream image represents a real person, we are actually dreaming of our soul image, which is interesting. For example, if I dream of my romantic partner and I see that person in my dream, it's that person is more or less my soul image. And I guess that's why the term soulmate exists. Apparently Dionysus represented perfect psychological harmony. He was raised by nymphs in the woods. He was an effeminate child. Tom girl, you could say. He is both self-nurturing and complete, which makes me think of transgenderism at first, but I don't think that would fit. Maybe perhaps non-binary gender would be closer to that ideal. In that sense, is one trying to become God? I don't know. Because we have become more aware of the way our language can stereotype sex roles, male men have become mail carriers, firemen have become firefighters, stewardesses have become flight attendants. That rings true, makes sense. Some of us like these moves away from the old roles and stereotypes, and some of us are uncomfortable with them. Well, ain't that the truth? I think that is because we are dealing with outer change, clothes, names, roles, without having made an inner change to befriend both our male and female aspects. I like that point a lot. I would agree with that. To compound the separation of differences, men and women in our society have been raised so differently that we do in fact see different worlds. I can believe that is probably very true. We suffer with our stereotypes. Also true. Some of them I embrace, though. Family fights are more in the nature of ritual than they are of any understanding. Emotion of the moment will blind you. The best-known spiritual wife in literature is Dante's Beatrice, his guide through heaven and hell. He was much more married to Beatrice than he was to his real wife, about whom we know so little. When we deny ourselves the Dionysian experience, we also deny ourselves true knowledge of ourselves, our mates, the life process, joy. We deny ourselves heaven on earth. A Jewish proverb observes that whatever legitimate pleasure we deny ourselves on earth will be denied us in heaven. Interesting. And that's where the question of the difference between something that causes pleasure for us, which becomes addictive, versus something that causes pleasure for us, which we don't feel the need to be addicted to, or don't feel the need to obsess over. Definitely thought-provoking. Well, that was a good one. I'm thinking of another book that I'm currently reading, which will be featured in next video, is called The Gambler by good old Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm excited for that one. And I've started to read the New American Standard Version of the Bible. I'm interested to see how symbolically that book speaks to me. That collection of books speaks to me as I read it. We'll see if I plan to do the whole thing or if it's just going to be a piecemeal type of deal. Otherwise, there's so much to be grateful for right now. I'm tired. It's been a long week. But I'm resting up. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with some good people soon. Looking forward to some good conversation as well. And I think I'm going to go get some good exercise in. Until next time.